The great chamber of the Galactic Council stretched out like a vast bowl carved from black stone. Thousands of seats rose in perfect circles, each one filled with beings from across the galaxy. The air hummed with dozens of different languages, as translators worked to make sense of the chaos. Today was special. Today they would decide if humans deserved a place among the stars. Counselor Vexitar stood at his podium, his green scales catching the light from the crystal dome above. His yellow eyes scanned the crowd with obvious pleasure. In his clawed hands he held a thin blue tablet that contained everything the galaxy knew about Earth and its people. Fellow beings of the Council, Vexitar began, his voice carrying easily through the chamber. We gathered today to review the most amusing application we have received in over 300 years. Laughter rippled through the seats. The bird-like Avirians in the upper levels chirped their approval. Their feathers rustled as they turned to whisper to each other behind their beaks. The crystalline silicoids made musical sounds that served as their version of chuckling. Even the floating gas beings of Nebula Prime pulsed with colors that meant they found something funny. Let us examine the facts, Vexitar continued, enjoying the attention. The species calls itself human. They live on a small blue world they have named Earth. This planet is mostly water, like some kind of oversized swimming pool. They have existed as a species for only 200,000 years. More laughter echoed through the chamber. 200,000 years was nothing. The Zephyrians had built cities older than the entire human race. The Avirians had been flying between stars when humans were still living in caves. But wait, it gets better, Vexitar said, his forked tongue flicking out in amusement. They only discovered fire 50,000 years ago. They learned to write just 5,000 years ago. And get this, they only left their own planet 200 years ago. The laughter grew louder. Several delegates had to hold their sides or whatever passed for sides in their species. The idea that such a young race wanted to join the Galactic Council was beyond funny. It was absurd. Their technology is so basic it hurts to look at, an Avirian delegate called out from the crowd. They still use chemical rockets to move between planets. Chemical rockets. We stopped using those 1,000,000 years ago. Their longest-lived members barely reach 100 of their years, added a silicoid, its voice ringing like broken glass. They die before they can learn anything useful. Vexitar nodded eagerly. And their society is a complete mess. They fight wars over things like oil and land. Oil. They burn dead plants for energy like some kind of primitive cave dwellers. They have over 200 different countries on one small planet, because they cannot agree on anything. The chamber erupted in fresh waves of laughter. The idea of hundreds of separate governments on one world was hilarious to beings who had united their entire species millions of years ago. They eat dead animals, someone shouted from the crowd. They sleep for 8 hours every day, called another. They age and die from diseases we cured before we had writing. Each new fact about humans brought more laughter. The delegates were having the time of their lives making fun of Earth's people. It was better than entertainment. But in the back row of the highest section, one being did not laugh. Commander HFY sat silent and still, his forearms crossed over his massive chest. His thick shell was covered in scars from a dozen different wars. Where his left eye should have been, there was only an empty socket and old burn marks. The Krathari commander had seen more battles than most beings saw in 10 lifetimes. He had fought in the Hegemony Wars, survived the Void Storm conflicts, and led troops through campaigns that most species only read about in history books. His people respected strength above all else, and he had earned his position through blood and victory. Unlike the others, HFY was not amused by the discussion of humans. Something about the way the other delegates laughed bothered him. It reminded him of young soldiers who had never seen real combat, bragging about how brave they were before their first battle. Look at their military history, Vexitar continued, reading from his tablet. They have been fighting wars for their entire existence. Not the clean, civilized conflicts we understand, but brutal affairs with primitive weapons. They use metal, slugs fired from tubes. They drop explosive devices from flying machines. They even fight each other with sharp pieces of metal attached to sticks. The laughter was so loud now that the crystal dome above rang like a bell. The idea of beings fighting with metal sticks was the funniest thing many of the delegates had ever heard. And yet, Vextar said, his voice rising above the noise, they think they are ready to join us. These short-lived, primitive, war-loving creatures believe they have something to offer the galaxy. He paused for effect, letting the silence build. Then he smiled, showing all of his sharp teeth. I move that we reject their application immediately. Perhaps in another 1,000 years, when they have grown up a bit, they can try again, assuming they do not destroy themselves first. The vote was immediate and overwhelming. Thousands of voices called out their approval. Lights flashed green across the chamber as the electronic voting system recorded the decision. The humans were rejected by the largest margin in council history. As the delegates began to file out, still chuckling about the silly humans and their funny little planet, Commander Ketheva remained in his seat. He stared down at the now empty, speaking platform where Vextar had delivered his speech. Something was wrong. In all his years of war, he had learned to trust his instincts. They had kept him alive when others died. They had helped him win battles that should have been lost. And right now, those instincts were telling him that the council had just made a terrible mistake. The other delegates saw humans as weak because they were young. They saw them as primitive because their technology was simple. They saw them as foolish because they fought so many wars. But Ketheva saw something else. He saw a species that had survived for 200,000 years on a world that tried to kill them. He saw beings who had climbed out of caves to reach the stars in just 50,000 years. He saw warriors who had never known a time without conflict and had grown strong because of it. The Kratari commander stood slowly, his joints creaking with age and old wounds. Around him, the great chamber emptied as beings returned to their ships and their safe, peaceful worlds. But Ketheva felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. Somewhere out there, beyond the edge of known space, ancient enemies were stirring. The kind of enemies that would not be stopped by superior technology or long lifespans or civilized behavior. The kind that would require something the galaxy had forgotten how to do. The kind that would require warriors who knew how to fight and never gave up. As he walked toward the exit, Ketheva wondered if the council would still be laughing when that day came. 3 days after the rejection, alarms rang through the docking bays of Zentara Prime. Security officers rushed to their posts as scanners detected an unscheduled arrival. A human ship was approaching the station without permission. The vessel was small and ugly by galactic standards. Its hull was gray metal covered in patches and welds. Thick armor plating made it look like a floating brick. Unlike the smooth, elegant ships of other species, this one looked like it was built for war rather than beauty. Station Commander Zelmoth watched the ship dock through his office window. The blue-skinned Aquarian had been managing Zentara Prime for over 50 years. He had seen thousands of ships come and go, but human vessels always made him nervous. They looked dangerous even when they were just sitting still. "Sir," his aide called from the communications panel, "the humans are requesting an audience with the Galactic Council. They say they want to address the rejection of their application." Zelmoth sighed and ran a webbed hand over his smooth head. "Tell them the council has already made its decision. There is nothing more to discuss. They say they will not leave until they are heard." The station commander looked at the human ship again. It had weapon ports along its hull and sensor arrays that looked military grade. The last thing he wanted was trouble with armed humans on his station. "Fine," he said finally. "Contact Counselor Vextar. Tell him the humans want to make fools of themselves in public. He might find it entertaining." Within hours, word had spread throughout the station. The funny little humans were going to speak to the council again. Delegates who had already left decided to stay just to watch the show. They expected begging, or maybe angry threats. Either way, it would be amusing. The council chamber filled quickly. Beings took their seats with anticipation, like children waiting for a performance to begin. They whispered and laughed as they waited for the human delegation to arrive. When the doors opened, 3 humans walked into the chamber. They moved with purpose, their backs straight and their eyes forward. They wore simple blue uniforms without decoration or fancy colors. Everything about them was plain and functional. The first human was tall and broad-shouldered with gray hair and hard eyes. Scars crossed his face and hands, marking him as someone who had seen violence. This was Captain Jake Morrison, though the council did not know his name yet. Behind him walked a woman with brown hair pulled back in a tight knot. She carried a data pad and moved with the careful steps of someone used to working in laboratories. Dr. Lisa Carter had spent years studying alien life forms, preparing for this moment. The third human was younger, with the lean build of someone who spent time in small spaces. Commander Rick Hayes had piloted ships through asteroid fields and past enemy guns. His eyes constantly scanned the chamber, noting exits and potential threats. The three humans walked to the center of the chamber and stopped. They did not bow or show any sign of fear. They simply stood and waited for permission to speak. Counselor Vextar rose from his seat with a wide smile. His yellow eyes glittered with amusement as he looked down at the small human delegation. "Well, well," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "The humans have returned. Have you come to beg us to reconsider? Or perhaps to threaten us with your primitive weapons?" Laughter echoed from the seats around them. The delegates were already enjoying themselves. Captain Morrison stepped forward. When he spoke, his voice was calm and steady, without anger or pleading. "We have come to correct some misunderstandings," he said. "The Council has made its decision based on incomplete information." "Incomplete?" Vextar laughed. "We know everything about your species. You are young, primitive, and violent. What more is there to know?" "You know facts," Morrison replied. "But you do not understand what those facts mean." Dr. Carter moved to stand beside the captain. She activated her datapad and began to speak. "You call us young because we have only existed for 200,000 years. But in that time we have survived ice ages that lasted tens of thousands of years. We have lived through volcanic eruptions that blocked out the sun. We have endured plagues that killed half our population." Images appeared on the chamber's main screen, showing frozen landscapes and ash-covered skies. The delegates stopped laughing as they watched scenes of humans struggling to survive in impossible conditions. Other species evolved on stable worlds. Carter continued. "We evolved on a planet that tried to kill us every few thousand years. We learned to adapt or die." She changed the display to show human settlements in different environments: desert cities, underwater colonies, stations in frozen wastelands, and bases on active volcanoes. "You say we are primitive because our technology is simple. But we have colonized every environment on our world. We live in places where your people would die in minutes, and we do it with basic tools and determination." Commander Hayes stepped forward next. His young face was serious as he addressed the council. "You mock our chemical rockets and metal weapons. But those simple tools carried us from our homeworld to a dozen different planets. We built space stations and colonies with technology you abandoned millions of years ago." The chamber had grown quiet. The delegates were still listening, but the laughter had stopped. "You think we are weak because we die young," Hayes continued. "But that gives us something you have lost. We know our time is limited, so we use every moment. We do not have the luxury of waiting centuries to make decisions." Morrison took control. Again, his hard eyes scanning the faces of the alien delegates. "You say we are violent because we fight wars. You are right. We have been fighting for our entire existence. But that has taught us things that peaceful species never learn." He paused, letting his words sink in. "We know how to survive when everything goes wrong. We know how to keep fighting when defeat seems certain. We know how to work together when our lives depend on it." The captain's voice grew stronger as he continued. "You have lived in peace for so long that you have forgotten what it means to struggle. Your technology is advanced, but what happens when it fails? Your people live for thousands of years, but what do you do when faced with something that wants to kill you?" Silence filled the chamber. For the first time since the humans had arrived, none of the delegates were laughing. In the back row, Commander Kethva leaned forward in his seat. His scarred face showed the first hint of respect as he watched the human captain speak. Morrison looked around the chamber one more time before delivering his final statement. We did not come here to beg for membership. We came to offer you something you have forgotten you need. When the galaxy faces its next great threat, you will want warriors who know how to fight and never surrender. He turned toward the exit, followed by Carter and Hayes. But before they could leave, a deep voice called out from the back of the chamber. Wait! Commander Kethva stood slowly, his massive frame commanding attention. The chamber fell completely silent as the Krithari veteran spoke. What makes you think humans can succeed where others have failed? Morrison stopped and turned back. For the first time since entering the chamber, he smiled. It was not a happy smile, but the grin of someone who had faced death and lived to tell about it, because we do not know how to quit. The two warriors stared at each other across the vast chamber. One was an alien veteran covered in scars from a dozen wars. The other was a human soldier who had never known peace. In that moment, something passed between them. Recognition, understanding, respect. The galaxy was about to learn what humans were really capable of. The tension in the chamber was thick enough to cut with a knife. Captain Morrison and Commander Kethva stared at each other across the vast space, two warriors from different worlds but sharing the same understanding of what it meant to fight. Before either could speak again, the great doors of the chamber burst open. A young aviarian aide rushed in, her feathers ruffled with panic. Her talons clicked against the stone floor as she ran toward the center podium, clutching a red data crystal in her wing. Emergency alert, she screeched, her voice breaking with fear. Priority 1 message from Deep Space Monitor Station 7. The chamber erupted in confused chatter. Emergency alerts were rare. Priority 1 messages were almost unheard of. The last time anyone had seen a red data crystal, entire star systems had been under attack. Counselor Vextar's yellow eyes went wide as he took the crystal from the aide's trembling wing. He inserted it into the main display system, and the chamber's screens came to life with grainy images from the edge of known space. What they saw made every delegate's blood run cold. Ships moved through the darkness between stars, but these were not normal ships built by any known species. They looked alive with curved hulls that pulsed like beating hearts. Organic weapons grew from their sides like tumors. Their hulls were black as space itself, but veins of sickly green light ran across their surfaces. The camera shook as whatever was recording tried to stay hidden. In the background, space filled with more ships, dozens, hundreds. A fleet so large, it blocked out the stars. The Devourer fleet, someone whispered from the crowd. The word spread through the chamber like a disease, growing louder with each repetition until it became a chorus of fear. The Devourers. Every species in the galaxy knew the stories. They were older than recorded history, appearing from the dark, spaces between galaxies to consume entire worlds. They did not conquer or enslave. They simply ate everything in their path and moved on. The last time they had appeared was 3,000 years ago. They had consumed 12 star systems before vanishing back into the void. Entire civilizations had been wiped out. Billions of beings had died screaming as their worlds were stripped bare. Where are they heading? Vextar demanded, his voice cracking with fear. The aviarian aide consulted her tablet with shaking wings. Long-range sensors show them moving toward the Outer Rim territories. Current course suggests they will reach the Kepler colonies in 6 standard days. The chamber exploded into panic. Delegates jumped from their seats, some heading for the exits while others shouted questions at the screen. The Kepler colonies were home to over 50 million beings across 8 different worlds. We must evacuate immediately, called out a silicoid delegate, his crystalline voice ringing with terror. Alert all ships in the area to begin emergency withdrawal. The Defense Fleet needs to establish a perimeter, added an Aquarian representative. We can delay them while the civilians escape. More voices joined the chaos, each one suggesting retreat or evacuation. It was the same response the galaxy had used for thousands of years when facing the Devourers. Run and hope they lose interest. Through all the shouting and panic, Captain Morrison had not moved. He stood quietly in the center of the chamber, watching the images on the screen with the calm eyes of someone who had seen war before. Dr. Carter and Commander Hayes flanked him, equally still in the storm of alien fear. They studied the enemy, ships with professional interest, noting weapon placements and formation patterns. "How many ships do we have in the defense fleet?" Morrison asked suddenly, his voice cutting through the noise. The chamber fell silent. Every delegate turned to stare at the human captain. Counselor Vextar blinked his yellow eyes in confusion. "What did you say?" "How many ships do we have?" Morrison repeated. "What kind of weapons? How many trained crews?" "We." Vextar laughed, but there was no humor in it now. "There is no we, human. Your application was rejected, remember? This is not your problem." Morrison stepped closer to the podium, his hard face showing no emotion. "Those colonies you mentioned. Kepler 7 has a human settlement. 3,000 people, including families. With children, that makes it our problem." Dr. Carter moved to stand beside him. "The Devourer bioships use organic armor that regenerates damage. Energy weapons are largely ineffective. Most galactic fleets rely on plasma cannons and laser arrays." Commander Hayes joined them. "Their formation suggests they expect resistance from above and below, but not direct frontal assault. They are used to fighting enemies who try to maintain distance." The three humans spoke with calm certainty while around them. Alien delegates panicked and argued. It was like watching adults discuss dinner plans while children screamed about monsters under the bed. Commander Kethva pushed through the crowd, his massive frame clearing a path to the center of the chamber. His scarred face was grim but determined. "The defense fleet has 200 ships," he said, answering Morrison's earlier question. "Mixed classes, mostly patrol vessels and light cruisers. Maybe 30 ships of the line with heavy weapons." Morrison nodded as if this confirmed something he already suspected. "Response time to reach Kepler?" he asked. 4 days if we push the engines," Kethva replied. "But it will not matter. The Devourers have never been defeated in open battle. Every encounter ends the same way. They consume everything and move on. Because you fight them the wrong way," Morrison said simply. The chamber erupted again, this time with outrage instead of fear. How dare this primitive human criticize galactic military doctrine? Species that had been fighting wars for millions of years did not need advice from beings who still used chemical rockets. But Kethva held up one massive hand, silencing the protests. "Explain," he said. Morrison gestured toward the screen, where the Devourer ships continued their slow advance through space. "You treat them like a normal enemy fleet. You try to outrange them, outmaneuver them, use superior technology to win clean victories. But they are not a normal enemy." He pointed to the largest ships in the formation, massive vessels that dwarfed anything in the galactic fleet. "They are predators. They expect their prey to run. When you maintain distance and fight carefully, you are doing exactly what they want. They can regenerate damage faster than you can cause it." Dr. Carter stepped forward, her scientific mind already working on the problem. "Biological systems have limits. Push them hard enough, fast enough, and they cannot adapt. Overwhelm their healing abilities and they become vulnerable." Hayes nodded agreement. "Hit them where they do not expect it. Get in close where their size works against them. Make them fight on our terms instead of theirs." The alien delegates stared at the humans as if they had gone insane. Fight the Devourers up close? It was suicide, but Commander Kethva was nodding, slowly, his military experience recognizing the logic in their words. "You want to ram ships down their throats," he said. "If that is what it takes," Morrison replied, without hesitation. The Krithari veteran looked around the chamber at the faces of the other delegates. Fear, confusion, and desperate hope mixed together in expressions that told him everything he needed to know. The galaxy's most advanced civilizations were paralyzed by an enemy they could not understand. But these primitive humans, with their short lives and simple weapons, were ready to charge straight into hell. For the first time in decades, Kethva smiled. "Against all protocol and common sense," he said in his deep voice, "I am authorizing human participation in the defense of Kepler 7. The chamber exploded in protests, but Kethva ignored them. He looked directly at Morrison with the respect of one warrior acknowledging another. "Show us how humans fight, Captain. Show us what we have been missing." Morrison nodded once, sharp and military. "We will need ships, crews, and every kinetic weapon you can find." "Why kinetic weapons?" Vextar demanded. Morrison's smile was cold and hard as winter steel. "Because sometimes the old ways work best. And because we brought some. Ideas you have never seen before." The human fleet that assembled near Kepler 7 looked like a collection of flying scrap metal compared to the sleek ships of the Galactic Defense Force. 18 human vessels hung in space, their gray hulls scarred and patched from years of hard use. They had names like Liberty, Defiance, and Iron Will painted in simple white letters on their sides. Commander Kethva watched them from the bridge of his flagship, the Krathari battle cruiser Vengeance. His tactical officers studied the human ships with confusion and barely hidden contempt. "Sir?" His weapons officer reported. "The human vessels are equipped with primitive kinetic cannons and missile systems. Their armor appears to be basic steel alloy with ceramic plating. I detect no energy shields or plasma weapons." Kethva nodded, but said nothing. He had seen the human ships up close during their journey to Kepler. What his officers saw as primitive, he recognized as practical. Every piece of equipment served a purpose. Nothing was wasted on appearance or comfort. "Their formation is wrong too," added the navigation officer. "They are clustering too close together. One good shot could take out multiple ships." Again, Kethva remained silent. He had noticed the human formation as well. It looked chaotic to trained galactic officers, but there was a pattern to it. The humans were not trying to look impressive. They were preparing for something specific. "Captain," Morrison's voice crackled over the communication system from his flagship, the destroyer Liberty. "All ships, this is Morrison. Enemy contact in 15 minutes. Remember what we discussed. Stay tight, hit hard, and do not let them breathe." The human ships began to move, their engines burning bright blue against the darkness of space. They accelerated toward the edge of the system where long-range sensors had detected the approaching Devourer fleet. Kethva opened a channel to Morrison. "Captain, my ships are ready to support your attack. We have 40 vessels with full weapon loads." "Negative, Commander," Morrison replied. "Keep your ships back for now. We need to test something first." Before Kethva could ask what they needed to test, space in front of them began to change. The stars wavered and bent as massive shapes emerged from faster-than-light travel. The Devourer fleet had arrived. The alien ships were even more horrible in person than they had appeared on the recordings. Their black hulls pulsed with sickly, green veins of light. Organic weapons grew from their sides like diseased growths. The largest vessels were over 2 kilometers long, dwarfing anything in the human fleet. Kethva counted at least 60 enemy ships, with more still emerging from their jump. Each one was larger and more heavily armed than his own flagship. "All human ships engage." Morrison's voice cut through the tactical chatter. What happened next defied every rule of space combat that Kethva had learned in 30 years of war. Instead of forming a battle line and engaging at maximum range, the human ships charged straight at the Devourer fleet. Their engines burned at full power as they accelerated directly toward the enemy formation. The Devourers responded as they always did. Bioplasma cannons opened fire, sending streams of green death across space. Organic missiles launched from weapon pods seeking the approaching human ships, but the humans did not try to dodge or maintain distance. They flew straight through the enemy fire, their thick armor absorbing hits that would have crippled galactic vessels. Ships took damage but kept flying, their crews making repairs even as they fought. The Liberty led the charge, Morrison's voice calm and steady as he directed the attack. "Target the big one in the center. All ships focus fire on the same point. Do not spread out your shots." The human kinetic weapons opened fire. Solid metal slugs traveling at incredible speeds slammed into the Devourer flagship. Each impact sent shockwaves through the organic hull, cracking the living armor faster than it could heal. But that was just the beginning. As the human ships closed to point-blank range, they did something no galactic fleet had ever attempted. They kept going. The destroyer Courage rammed directly into a Devourer cruiser, its reinforced bow punching through the alien hull like a spear. The ship's reactor overloaded a second later, creating a massive explosion that tore both vessels apart. The cruiser Iron Will followed suit, its captain steering his dying ship into the weapon pods of another Devourer. The collision disabled the alien's main guns and sent both ships spinning out of control. Kethva watched in amazement as human ship after human ship made ramming attacks on the enemy fleet. It was insane. It was suicidal. It was also working. The Devourers had never faced an enemy willing to trade ships one for one. Their tactics relied on overwhelming firepower and the assumption that their opponents would try to preserve their own forces. They had no response to an enemy that treated their own ships as weapons. "Sir," his tactical officer called out, "the human ship Defiance is surrounded. They are taking heavy fire." On the main screen, Kethva watched as the human cruiser fought alone against 3 Devourer vessels. Its armor was cracked and burning. Atmosphere leaked from dozens of holes in its hull, but the ship did not retreat. Instead, it increased power to its weapons and kept firing. The crew fought their ship until the very end, their kinetic cannons punching holes in enemy hulls even as their own vessel came apart around them. When the Defiance finally exploded, it took one of the Devourer ships with it. "Commander," Morrison's voice came over the radio. "We need support now. We have opened a hole in their formation." Kethva looked at his tactical display. The human fleet was down to 8 ships, but they had destroyed or disabled 15 Devourer vessels. More importantly, they had done something the Galactic Fleet had never managed. They had broken the enemy formation. "All ships, advance," Kethva ordered. "Follow the humans' lead. Close-range engagement. Target the damaged vessels first." The Krathari battlecruiser Vengeance surged forward, followed by the rest of the Galactic Fleet. But instead of their usual long-range tactics, they closed to point-blank range as the humans had shown them. The battle became a vicious brawl in the darkness of space. Ships from both sides traded devastating blows at ranges where every shot counted. The careful formations and elegant maneuvers of traditional space combat gave way to raw determination and firepower. Dr. Carter's voice came over the communication system from her position on the Liberty's bridge. "Commander Kethva, we are reading massive bioelectrical activity from the Devourer flagship. It appears to be some kind of command vessel." "What do you recommend?" Kethva asked. "Take it out, and the rest of their fleet loses coordination." "But it is heavily defended," Morrison's voice cut in. "Liberty is moving to attack the flagship. All remaining human ships, form up on me." Kethva watched as the 5 surviving human vessels regrouped around Morrison's flagship. They were all damaged, leaking atmosphere and trailing debris, but they flew in perfect formation toward the largest Devourer ship. The alien flagship was a monster, over 3 kilometers long and bristling with organic weapons. It began firing everything it had at the approaching human ships. The cruiser Endurance took a direct hit and broke apart. The destroyer Freedom lost its engines and drifted away, still firing its guns. The corvette Ranger exploded in a ball of fire and metal. That left only the Liberty and the heavy cruiser Resolve racing toward the enemy flagship. "This is Morrison." The captain's voice came over the radio, calm despite the chaos around him. "Resolve, can you make it?" "Negative, Liberty. We have lost main power. You are on your own." The Liberty flew alone toward the Devourer flagship, its hull cracked and burning but its weapons still firing. Morrison guided his ship through the storm of enemy fire with skill that impressed even Kethva. But as the destroyer closed the final distance, a massive bioplasma bolt struck its engine section. The Liberty's reactor went critical, and Morrison had seconds before his ship exploded. Instead of trying to escape, the human captain did what his species did best. He refused to quit. "All ships, this is Morrison. It has been an honor fighting with you." The Liberty's engines flared one last time as Morrison pushed them past their limits. The destroyer accelerated directly toward the Devourer flagship's bridge section, its damaged hull glowing white-hot from the strain. The collision created an explosion that lit up half the solar system. When the light faded, both ships were gone. But the Devourer fleet was broken. Without their flagship, the remaining alien vessels lost coordination. They began to retreat, some ships fleeing individually while others tried to form new groups. Kethva did not let them escape. His fleet pursued the scattered Devourers, destroying ship after ship, until only a handful limped away into deep space. When the battle was over, Kethva stood alone on his bridge, staring at the debris field where brave beings had fought and died. 18 human ships had faced 60 Devourer vessels and won, not through superior technology or careful tactics, but through raw courage and the refusal to surrender. For the first time in galactic history, the Devourers had been not just repelled but defeated, and it had taken a species the galaxy considered primitive to show them how it was done. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened 24 hours after the Battle of Kepler 7. Word of the impossible victory had spread throughout known space faster than light itself. For the first time in recorded history, the Devourer fleet had been defeated in open combat. The great chamber buzzed with nervous energy as delegates took their seats. Gone was the casual arrogance of the previous sessions. The beings who had laughed at humanity just days before now spoke in hushed whispers, their voices filled with shock and confusion. Commander Kethva stood at the center podium, his massive frame bearing fresh scars from the battle. His left arm was in a biocast and new burn marks covered the right side of his face. But his eyes were bright with something that had been missing from galactic civilization for too long. Pride in a victory earned through blood and sacrifice. Counselor, Vextar sat in his usual seat, but the green-scaled Zephyrian looked smaller somehow. His yellow eyes darted nervously around the chamber, avoiding contact with the Krathari commander below. Fellow delegates, Kethva began, his deep voice carrying easily through the silent chamber. I have requested this emergency session to address a grave error in judgment made by this council. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Emergency sessions were rare enough, but having a military commander criticize the council's decisions was almost unheard of. 3 days ago, we rejected humanity's application for membership. We called them primitive, violent, and unworthy of joining galactic civilization. We laughed at their short lifespans, their simple technology, and their history of warfare. Kethva paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. Yesterday, those same humans saved 60 million lives across 8 worlds. They defeated an enemy that has terrorized the galaxy for millennia. They accomplished what our most advanced fleets have never managed to do. The chamber remained silent. Every delegate knew the basic facts of the battle, but hearing them stated so bluntly made the reality impossible to ignore. I was there, Kethva continued. I watched 18 human ships charge into a fleet of 60 Devourer vessels. I saw them fight with tactics we called suicidal and weapons we called primitive, and I watched them win. An aviarian delegate in the upper sections raised her wing. Commander, surely you cannot suggest that ramming attacks and kinetic weapons are superior to our energy-based systems? Kethva turned his scarred face toward the speaker. I suggest that victory is superior to defeat. The humans won because they understood something we had forgotten. Which is? Counselor Vextar asked, his voice lacking its usual confidence. That war is not about having the best technology or the longest lifespans or the most elegant tactics. War is about breaking the enemy's will to fight. It is about making them afraid of you instead of the other way around. The Krathari commander activated the chamber's main display system. Images from the battle appeared on the screens around them. Burning ships, desperate charges, explosions lighting up space like new stars. Watch this, Kethva said, highlighting a section of the recording. The human ship Courage rams a Devourer cruiser. Both vessels are destroyed. By our standards, this is wasteful and inefficient. The display zoomed in on the moments before impact. The human ship's bridge was visible through a crack in its armor. Inside, figures could be seen working calmly at their stations even as death approached. But look at what happens to the other Devourer ships after this attack. Kethva continued. The recording showed alien vessels beginning to spread out, breaking their tight formations. They start to fear the humans. They changed their tactics to avoid close contact. Another section of the battle played out on the screens. Here, the Destroyer Freedom loses its engines but continues fighting. Watch the Devourer response. The alien ships began targeting the disabled human vessel with everything they had, wasting firepower on a ship that was already out of the fight. Fear, Kethva said simply. The Devourers, who have never known defeat, became afraid of an enemy that would not surrender. Dr. Lisa Carter entered the chamber, escorted by 2 council guards. She was one of only 47 humans who had survived the battle, rescued from the wreckage of damaged ships by galactic rescue teams. With the council's permission, Kethva said, I would like Dr. Carter to explain the scientific basis for human effectiveness in combat. Vextar nodded reluctantly. He was curious despite himself. Carter moved to stand beside Kethva, her uniform torn and her left hand bandaged, but her voice was steady as she addressed the chamber. Humans evolved. On a death world, she began. For 200,000 years, everything on our planet tried to kill us. Ice ages, volcanic eruptions, predators, diseases, climate changes that happened faster than other species could adapt. Images of Earth appeared on the screens, glaciers advancing across continents, volcanoes blocking out the sun, massive storms that could level forests. We survived because we learned to think fast and act faster. Our short lifespans force us to make quick decisions. We do not have the luxury of spending decades analyzing every option. A silicoid delegate made a sound, like breaking crystal. But surely intelligence and careful planning are superior to rash action. Carter shook her head. Not in crisis situations. When a volcano erupts, you do not form a committee to study the best evacuation routes. You run. When an enemy attacks, you fight back immediately. You adapt or you die. She gestured toward the battle recording still playing on the screens. The Devourers expected us to fight like galactic species, maintain distance, use superior technology, preserve our forces. Instead, we did what Earth taught us to do. We attacked the threat directly using whatever weapons we had. Commander Hayes entered the chamber next, supporting himself on crutches. His left leg had been crushed when his ship's bridge collapsed, but he had insisted on attending the session. Human. Military doctrine is simple, he said, his young voice carrying clearly through the chamber. Hit the enemy harder than they hit you. Keep hitting them until they stop moving. Never give up, never surrender, never retreat unless you absolutely have to. An Aquarian delegate raised a webbed hand. But such tactics result in massive casualties. Your entire fleet was destroyed. Hayes nodded. 18 ships and over 4,000 people, but 60 million civilians are alive because of their sacrifice. That is a trade any human commander would make. The chamber fell silent again. The mathematics of warfare were brutal, but simple. 4,000 lives to save 60 million was an excellent exchange rate. But most galactic species had grown too civilized to think in such terms. Kethva stepped forward again, his voice growing stronger as he reached the heart of his argument. This is what we have lost, he said. The Krathari understand sacrifice. We built our civilization through conquest and blood. But even we had forgotten what it means to fight against impossible odds. He gestured toward the humans in the chamber. These beings reminded us. They showed us that sometimes the best technology is useless if you do not have the will to use it. They proved that courage and determination can overcome any advantage. The commander paused, his scarred face showing an emotion rarely seen in the clinical chambers of galactic politics. Respect. I have fought in the hegemony wars. I have led troops through campaigns that destroyed entire star systems. I have seen the best warriors our galaxy has produced. But I have never seen anything like what the humans did at Kepler 7. He looked directly at Counselor Vextar as he continued. We called them primitive because they fight with kinetic weapons. But those weapons work. We called them violent because they never stop fighting. But that saved millions of lives. We called them young and foolish because they make quick decisions. But those decisions won a battle we thought was impossible to win. Kethva activated a communication panel and spoke into it briefly. Moments later, the chamber doors opened and more humans entered, survivors from the battle, still bearing the wounds of their victory. I hereby formally recommend that humanity be granted immediate membership in the Galactic Council, HFY announced. Furthermore, I propose that we establish a joint military training program to learn from their combat experience. The vote was unanimous. Not a single delegate opposed the motion. Councillor Vextar stood slowly, his pride warring with the undeniable facts before him. Finally, he spoke. On behalf of the Galactic Council, I formally apologize for our previous decision. Humanity has proven their worth beyond any possible doubt. We would be honored to have you join us. Dr. Carter stepped forward to accept the offer. But before she could speak, alarms began ringing throughout the station. Emergency lights flashed as communication systems crackled to life. All stations, this is Deep Space Monitor 12. A panicked voice announced. We have multiple Devourer fleets retreating from the Outer Rim. Repeat, the Devourers are withdrawing from all combat zones upon learning of human involvement in galactic defense. The chamber erupted in amazed chatter. The psychological impact of humanity's victory was spreading faster than anyone had expected. Commander HFY smiled, showing his sharp teeth. It seems the galaxy's newest members have already begun earning their keep. In the months that followed, human military advisors would be stationed on worlds throughout galactic space. The techniques that had won the Battle of Kepler 7 would be studied and adapted by every major fleet in known space. The spec.